A lot of people hate me because they've only seen one side. There's also people who hate me because I exposed the fact that they were part of it. They don't like it. They're very pissed off. Now, the things that I did that were illegal, I had to do to defend myself. Because with all of the threats against me and all of the assaults against me, the police outright refused at every single juncture to even take a look or even entertain the thought that anyone would hurt me. Meanwhile, officers took part in hurting me and harming me. With Shannon, she's very sweet. She really is. However, she's an alcoholic, and she fails to realize, well, she does realize, actually. You can tell by the tone of her voice when she's trying to change the subject, that she doesn't want to admit to it. Now, while I was there, she had an example of being victimized for being the victim. See, she had made mention about how her ex had pushed her, and her son saw it. So then they wanted to have a home visit with her. So she's worried the whole time that I'm there, for that part anyway, that first of all, she's going to have to take a whiz quiz. So she's asking me how she can pass a whiz quiz and get alcohol out of her system. And she was very cranky for that whole week. And she was very worried about it. And she was angry also because, like, she was the one that was pushed. Why is it that she has to go through this stuff when she was the one that was pushed? And that's how the system works. So, for me, trying to get her to listen while she's drunk, that's not going to happen. Then there are things that I say to her repeatedly that she doesn't remember because she's too busy talking over me every sentence. Or every other sentence in some cases. Now, I'm painting the situation exactly as it is. I'm not saying that she's a bad person for being pushed. I'm not saying she's a bad person for being an alcoholic. I'm saying that the consequences of her being an alcoholic for me are dire. Now, with Christine Buhit, she's the one that let me use her account. Now, by that point, I'd already refused several people's alternate accounts. The reason for that is because I didn't want them having control of it. Control of what gets to be said, what gets to be heard. Like that Layla Dunan, Layla Johnson, Missy Johnson, whatever the hell her real name is. I don't know. That needs to be investigated. With my dad, him being a dick, he didn't want to understand. Every time I tried to tell him, Dad, please stop and listen to understand. I'll never understand you, Sean. That's right, because you're never going to make the effort. It's do as you say, or you're going to scream at me. He literally screamed at me for not calling that place 5 minutes after I called that place. And he's screaming at me. I already know it's not going to do any good. But he's insistent that because I'm in a different state, it makes a difference. But he was wrong. And he's not willing to admit that he's wrong. Just like Shannon's not willing to admit that she's an alcoholic. She's not willing to admit that the fact that she's an alcoholic did have a very big bearing on what was going on. Now, these people don't want me speaking about this in public, but they could have put it in a police report. They could have prevented it from coming out in public by putting it in a police report. But they make excuses not to try. That Kara Johnson lady made an effort. Or Kara Miles, whatever she wants to go by. And although she was the one playing head games, her stuff was admitted in court. It was allowed in court. Her opinions were taken by the police, who refused to listen to anything that I said. They only wrote down things that made it look like they were being the good guys. And with Shannon, if she could have stayed sober, a lot could have been done. Instead of bashing on me because her tiles in her kitchen didn't get done, Instead of bashing on me for that because I spoke out about her alcoholism, she could admit that she wouldn't allow me to do those tiles because every time I got started on it, every time I pulled the stuff out to get started on it, she was too drunk to let me do that. She wouldn't leave me alone. She's crying and she's whining and she's pining and she's complaining about Rick. And that's not a product of her being a bad person. It's a product of her alcoholism. Now with Christine Buhit, she's somebody that I care about greatly, but she cares more about her drugs than she cares about me. That's obvious. But the other thing is that she wanted to play like she was being victimized for something that she had done. She wanted to play like I was the bad guy for speaking out, my First Amendment right. She wanted to go out of her way to destroy evidence and prevent me from having access to that evidence, just like the police had done. Why did she do this, though? When she was homeless, she was pretty gung-ho about it. She wasn't very good at listening, just like most people, but she was gung-ho. And then they gave her housing. And as soon as she got her housing, that's when she started being a backstabber. She didn't want to lose her housing. She didn't want to stand up to the police. Too afraid. Why was I quiet at Shannon's? Because I saw what Rick was going through, and I didn't want that directed at me. I had to just take it, because I had to wait for that stuff that Graham was supposed to send. Did Graham keep his word? No, he didn't. If he'd have kept his word while I was in Colorado and paid me the money that he promised, he used the word promise, and he didn't keep that promise. And that right there prevented me from being able to do the things that I needed to do. It prevented me from being able to get the evidence that I needed and being able to go to the appointments that were already going to be ungodly impossible for me to get to without any money. But it didn't occur to him that him not keeping his word would affect me that way. He didn't even think about it. And then when I bring it up, he gets defensive, like I'm telling him he's a terrible person. No, he's not. The fact that he won't come forward about it, won't write a report about it, is what makes him a terrible person. In Jesus' name, my rosy red ass. I don't give a fuck if you say in Jesus' name. That doesn't make it okay that you fucking lied. And it is a lie. If he's not willing to come forward to the police about it, he's not willing to write it in a report, then he is lying. Otherwise, why wouldn't he? With me, I made so many efforts to try to get the police to take my report, and no matter what I tried, they wouldn't. Except when somebody went in with me. Actually went in with me. Not like Miss Peaches, who just happened to go to the same police department. She wasn't in that room with me. She didn't make those officers record it, which is what should have been done. But they wanted to make sure that it was their word versus mine. That's why it wasn't recorded. It's so that they could gang up on me and try to use public opinion and bias to prevent me from having an honest day in court, to prevent me from speaking out against those officers. The reason that I continue to make videos and the reason that I continue to speak out against the Bollingers is because of the things that happen to me over them playing victim. Now, Lexi Woods does this. See, she was pretending to be my friend when she got beaten up by her ex-boyfriend, and she's an alcoholic as well, by the way. So then, she wants to play victim when I ask her to be honest. She wants to play like I'm harassing her. No, I'm asking you to be honest. She didn't even know who I was, apparently. She was pretending she didn't know who I was. She was going out of her way not to get involved, not to tell the truth, and then she threatened me. Repeatedly. Well, go fuck yourself, Lexi Woods. You're a piece of shit. You're a fucking alcoholic whore. You don't like those names? How do you think I like it? How do you think I like being called a fucking child molester and a rapist and a murderer and a fucking stalker? Meanwhile, these people playing victim is fine. It's fine. These people refused to listen to what it is that I was trying to tell them, and then I'm a bad person because of it. I don't get this. Miss Jerry playing like her daughter is a victim, like I attacked her daughter for begging her to kill me. Her daughter said that she would listen, just like Miss Jerry did. And they're going out of their way to play victim. Yes, out of their way. They knew that's not what I was doing. They knew that what they were doing was exactly the things that make me fucking suicidal. Exactly the things that make me feel so hopeless that I want to blow my goddamn head off. And then people give me just enough help to where I can live for another day. But it's not the help that I need. I need a lawyer and an autism advocate. I need help showing that all of this shit happened. Help showing the things that happened to me as a result of this slander. But people won't even try. Well, I can't. It's out of state. Really? Really? If these Bollingers can do this from out of state, if they can play victim from out of state and slander my name to prevent me from having an honest day in court, why the fuck can't you come forward with the truth, you dumb cunt? See, all of that conversation, all of the conversations between me and Natalie that I posted up, instead of looking at all of that, they pick out the little tiny parts that they can twist to try to make it seem like it was something else entirely. And that's the parts that they put in these groups. And they show it to all of these other people who come and harass me over it for trying to speak out, saying you're a this and you're a that. Did you look at all of it? No, you didn't. And I tried to show all of it. My Facebook was open and public. I had to make it private to prevent evidence from being destroyed. But I also let a lot of people onto my Facebook so they could take a look for themselves. And they didn't. They just peeked through to try to find parts that they could twist. Just like Christians do with the Bible. I admit that I scream. I do. I admitted that I broke the law repeatedly. And I would not have had to if the cops would have done their jobs. If I hadn't been assaulted by Officer Lolatai on January 6th, I could have gone somewhere safe. I would have had the money with my disability to take care of myself, at least in part. Instead, it went for going to place to place to place to place to people who go out of their way not to listen. Go out of their way to judge me harshly for things that I can't help or things that I do to help me. A safe place means that I don't have to worry about getting arrested for driving an illegal vehicle. It means I don't have to worry about getting screamed at and fucking kept in a room by my dad. He stood in that doorway for 45 minutes yelling at me. And then all of these people want to play victim because I begged them to kill me because they wouldn't even try to put themselves in my shoes. See, when I use video games to wind down for the day, I'm a terrible person. But with Amanda Engeline, she tries to play like I'm calling her a bad person because she watches Game of Thrones. Or watched Game of Thrones. She goes out of her way to defend herself like I'm attacking her. No, I'm saying that's okay for you, but it's not okay for me. Because she is a terrible person. If you're going to tell somebody you love them and then go out of your way to play victim, you don't love them. You're a shitty, selfish person. Now, she wanted to defend herself. Well, it's okay, after everything that I have to do. No, Amanda, you don't have to do anything. You don't. You take care of basic survival. And you get paid for it. So many people don't. You get paid $11 an hour for something that you would have to do anyway and have a job on top of. And then these people are allowed to scream at me. They're allowed to yell at me. They're allowed to snap at me. They're allowed to talk over me. I'm not allowed to speak. I have to be afraid to speak because they're not going to listen. Shannon repeatedly in our conversation says, well, you should have told me that. Shannon, you know goddamn well that I did. I made every effort that I could. But you didn't want to listen. You wanted to talk over me. And that's why you got screamed at while I was in Nebraska in May of last year. That's why I yelled at you, Shannon. Because your alcoholism is exactly the issue. That issue that you don't want brought up. But if you had been able to control your alcoholism, those tiles would be done. If you were able to control your alcoholism, you wouldn't have been yelling at Rick every night. If you were able to control your alcoholism, those things would not have affected me how they did, and I would have been able to function. Now, with Amanda Engeline, the shit that they pulled in Montana, it set off red flags in my head while I was up there. For me, I have to worry about little shit that has dire consequences, like my evidence disappearing. The things that I explained to Graham about if he couldn't pay me that $100 that he said that he would. I explained that to him. He knew it. That's why he promised that he would give me that $100. And when he didn't, I barely had the money to get down to California and hopefully have enough money to live on for 2 weeks. With Graham not keeping his word, I went to California. Graham promised that he would send it out, all of the information that I needed, that Friday. The Friday when I left. Because I left on a Wednesday or a Thursday. He said, I'll send it out on Friday when I get paid. I promise. And I explained to him what would happen if he broke his promise again. How fucked a situation it would put me in. But again, he didn't keep his promise. And then he wants to throw it in my face that he spent $68 to send it to me 2 months almost after he was supposed to. All of my money is spent. I'm eating Shannon Alvarado's food. And then Shannon throws it back in my face that I ate her food. Look at all I did for you. Look at all I did for you. I know. I'm grateful for those things. I'm not being ungrateful in the least bit for what you did. What I'm ungrateful for is the things that you said you would help me with. The help that I was there for in specific. That you couldn't because you're an alcoholic. And not willing to admit it. And I'm a bad person for saying it. Had you kept your word while I was there, I wouldn't have made it public. There's a gentleman who wants to send me some money he wants me to buy a camper with. I don't know that he's going to send me the money, but honestly, he's the only person who's actually been steadfast through all of this. He's been with me almost since I hurt my back. When Josh Hughes didn't pay the money to pay for not the shop rent, but the storage rent afterwards, like, first of all, when I couldn't pay that, I lost everything. But Josh, I allowed him to take all of the computers that were in there. All of them. Even the ones that were mine, so that it wouldn't go to waste. And I had planned on going back to that storage facility, but I got stuck on the road. I couldn't go back to the storage facility. It's wide open. Everything is all out in the open for people to do whatever they want with. And I can't go back there because I'm stuck. And I'm not allowed to be frustrated. They're like, well, Sean, you know, why do you want this stuff from those groups from months ago? Because those things that happened months ago, those things that those people did months ago, I still have to deal with the consequences of. I am still homeless. I am without money. And I still had to break the law in order to try to force the cops to do their goddamn jobs. Meanwhile, people like Darren O'Connor, who pretended that they cared, went out of their way to show me that they didn't. Like, making no effort whatsoever to make a police report and playing fucking stupid and playing victim after you do wrong. And he did do wrong. He had the chance to help me. Sure, he took the pictures of my wrist, but he didn't write a report about it. Didn't even try. Now, he can do stuff for Samuel Leon Lawrence IV, who, by the way, was not homeless when that happened. And he can do the same thing for Zaid Atkinson, who, by the way, was not homeless when that happened. And Michelle Rodriguez, the same officer, did the same shit to all of us. But, even though that officer has a history of doing those things to people, both before and after me, and although the media talked to Darren O'Connor, he chose not to bring up my name. Chose not to bring light to the amount of shit that I have gone through. Chose to assume the worst in me and down on me and my character. And that's why I down on his. Shannon's allowed to get drunk and scream at me, and she did on the phone on several occasions. When I'm trying to be nice about it, she ignores me. You know why she called me the other night? Because I texted her saying that if she didn't call me within an hour, I was going to block her phone number. And when she called, she talked over me most of the time. She didn't want to admit or even fathom the idea that her alcoholism is the reason that I was shut down. Not the fact that she was drinking, but the fact that when people are drinking, they get a certain way, and that certain way is not helpful. They're not able to comprehend what's going on. They're not able to retain the information. With my dad, he didn't even try to listen to the information. He was too busy snapping at me. He wanted to go out of his way to play victim. When he knew he was recorded, he outright lied repeatedly. Why? Because he doesn't want to be painted as the bad guy. And in his mind, that's what I'm doing by telling the truth. In Shannon's mind, that's what I'm doing by telling the truth. In Rick's mind, that's what I'm doing by telling the truth. Meanwhile, if they'd have told the truth, if they'd have actually listened to me, any of them, I wouldn't be making any public videos about them. I'd be working on the things that I need to. Right now, I want to kill myself because I can't get anyone to actually look at it. Now, is Shannon making offers of if I send it there? No, she's not going to look at it. It'll sit there for 6 months. And Rick, well, he's very pissed off. He might do something vindictive and evil and mean. He might throw it away. He might scream and yell at Shannon because he doesn't want her to help me. He might treat her like shit for trying to help me. Meanwhile, she can't help me unless she's willing to sober up and willing to admit that she's an alcoholic and willing to admit how her alcoholism affects those around her. She's not going to do that. Just like my dad's not going to admit that he didn't make any effort to help me how I was asking him. It was do as he wants, or I get screamed at and yelled at and berated and threatened with being kicked out. I invested in going to see my father because he was going to help me. And he didn't. Not even a little bit. All of his help has actually cost me in the long run. But he doesn't have to worry about that. Because I'm not actually his son. He doesn't actually care about me. He cared that his manhood was challenged. He's not willing to admit that he could ever possibly do anything wrong. Brian Schwartz, the perfect.